I didn't think lightning could strike twice. After the story about the abandoned church at the edge of town, I assumed I had seen the worst of it. The calls slowed. The meetings stopped. People grew tired. Fear, I learned, doesn't disappear. It just looks for a new place to live. About a year later, I was assigned to cover a local elementary school. The administration had requested a reporter be present at a community forum. The reason wasn't clear at first. They said there were concerns. That word again. When I arrived, the gymnasium was already full. Parents sat in folding chairs, arms crossed, whispering to one another. Teachers stood stiffly along the walls. I recognized the look immediately. Something had spread. The principal opened the meeting with a prepared statement. He spoke carefully, choosing every word as if stepping across broken glass. He said a number of students had made disturbing claims during counseling sessions. Claims about being taken somewhere, claims about ceremonies, claims about an abandoned church several miles away, a different one than before. This church had been closed even longer. A small brick chapel near a rural road, surrounded by overgrown grass and a collapsed fence. The room erupted. Parents demanded answers. Teachers denied knowledge. Counselors looked overwhelmed. Then one mother stood up and said something that chilled me. She said her son had described the church before she ever mentioned it. Same red doors, same broken cross above the entrance, same candle smell. I wrote everything down. Over the following weeks, I spoke to counselors, teachers, and several parents, always off the record. What I learned disturbed me deeply. The stories didn't emerge all at once. They appeared after counseling sessions, where children were asked open-ended questions about dreams, fears, and nightmares. Some children initially said nothing. Others said they were scared of bad people. Then, slowly, details appeared. Candles, chanting, dark robes. One child said there was a man who wrote things down. That detail spread like wildfire. Soon, multiple children mentioned a man with a notebook. Parents demanded police involvement. Investigators interviewed the children again, this time with parents present. The stories became more detailed. Too detailed. That was when some professionals began to worry. I spoke privately with a psychologist who had reviewed the interviews. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "These stories are growing in the telling. That's not how memory works." The abandoned church was searched. No evidence, no remains, no signs of recent gatherings, no fingerprints, no biological traces. But belief doesn't require proof. A group of parents formed a committee. They held nightly vigils outside the school. They demanded resignations. They accused teachers by name. I watched careers collapse. One teacher resigned after being confronted in a grocery store. Another family moved out of town entirely. Then something happened that no one expected. One of the children, older than the rest, quietly told a counselor that they had made it up. Not maliciously. They said they thought it was a dream at first. Then they heard other kids talking. Then adults started asking questions. They said they didn't want to disappoint anyone. The confession didn't make headlines. It barely made a paragraph in the paper, because by then, the town had already decided what it believed. The church was fenced off permanently. The school replaced its counseling staff. Years later, when I followed up on the case, I learned that most of the allegations were formally withdrawn. No charges were ever filed. But the damage was irreversible. Families split apart. Teachers never returned. Children grew up believing something terrible had happened, even if it hadn't. One former student told me years later, "I don't know what's real anymore, but I still dream about that church." I realized then that the horror wasn't what happened in those buildings. It was what fear convinced people they remembered. I was a local reporter in the early 1980s, assigned to cover community stories most people ignored. Town meetings, zoning disputes, church fundraisers, the kind of stories that never made headlines. That changed in 1981. It started with a call from a woman who refused to give her name. She asked if I was the reporter who listens. I didn't know how to answer that. She told me there was an abandoned church on the outskirts of town, a small wooden structure that had been closed for years. She said people were afraid of it. I assumed vandalism, teenagers, trespassing. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said parents believed rituals were happening there. Not parties, not drugs. Rituals. I almost laughed until she told me how many people believed it. Over the next few weeks, more calls came in. Parents, teachers, even a volunteer firefighter. They all told versions of the same story. Children coming home shaken. Nightmares about candles and chanting. Claims of being taken to the church at night. No two stories matched perfectly, but the location always did. I decided to visit the church myself. It sat beyond the last paved road, half hidden by trees. The building was old, but not ancient. White paint peeling, windows broken. The door hanging slightly open. Nothing about it looked ceremonial, just abandoned. Inside, the pews were overturned. Graffiti covered the walls. Candles, dozens of them, melted down to stubs across the floor. That part unsettled me. Candles weren't unusual, but there were too many, and they were arranged deliberately. Circles, lines, patterns. I photographed everything. When I published the article, I was careful with my words. Allegations. Community concern. No evidence confirmed. It didn't matter. The town exploded. Parents organized meetings. Church groups held prayer vigils. Police began nightly patrols. Then the digging started. Someone claimed there were burial sites behind the church. Within days, dozens of parents showed up with shovels. I was there when they dug. They found nothing. No bones, no clothing, nothing. But instead of calming people, it made things worse. Because some parents said the ground had been tampered with. Others claimed evidence had already been removed. One man told me with complete sincerity, they cleaned it up before we got here. The church was boarded up shortly after. Padlocked. Condemned. No charges were filed. No arrests made. But the town never went back to normal. Families moved away. Friendships ended. People accused each other quietly. Years later, the church was demolished. I covered that story too. And as I watched the building come down, I realized something. Whether the allegations were true or not, that place destroyed the town anyway. By the time the third story reached me, I was already tired. Not physically, emotionally. I had learned how quickly fear could reshape a town, how rumors could harden into memories, and how belief could outpace truth. I told myself I would be more careful this time. I wasn't prepared for how different this one would be. The chapel sat miles outside a rural community, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that cut through farmland and trees. It had once served a handful of families decades earlier, but attendance dwindled and eventually it was closed. Unlike the other churches, this one hadn't been vandalized. No graffiti, no broken windows, no signs of trespassing. It simply stood there, untouched. People avoided it. I heard about it through a former deputy who contacted me quietly. He said he didn't want his name printed, he just wanted someone to listen. He told me adults, not children, had begun reporting disturbing experiences connected to the chapel. Not rumors, experiences. It started with a volunteer fireman who responded to a call one night about lights seen inside the building. When he arrived, the chapel was dark, but he said he heard singing, low, slow, not loud enough to identify words. When he opened the door, the sound stopped. Inside, the pews were dusty and undisturbed. No footprints, no candles, nothing. Within weeks, others came forward. A farmer claimed he saw figures moving near the chapel late at night. A woman said she heard chanting while driving past and felt compelled to stop, until fear overtook her and she drove away. These weren't hysterical people. They were respected members of the community. I drove out to the chapel alone one afternoon. The building looked ordinary, almost peaceful. Inside, sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting faded colors across the floor. The air smelled old, wood and dust. Nothing about the place felt threatening, but the silence was heavy. I stayed longer than I meant to. Listening, waiting. Nothing happened. Then I noticed something subtle. In the guest book near the entrance, left from years earlier, there were recent signatures. Not names, just initials, dates, many of them clustered around the same weeks the reports began. I photographed the pages. When the panic reached its peak, the police investigated. They interviewed witnesses, reviewed timelines, searched the grounds. No evidence of rituals, no gatherings, no crimes. Eventually, pressure mounted for people to retract their statements. Some did, quietly. Others refused. One man, the most vocal witness, agreed to speak with me again years later. He admitted something that stayed with me. He said he no longer believed what he saw was real, but he still felt it. He said the fear hadn't gone away just because the explanation changed. He said, "Even if it was in my head, it still lives there." The chapel was eventually closed off completely, not because of evidence, but because no one wanted to be responsible for reopening it. Fear had claimed it. Years later, when the building was finally demolished, the town held no ceremony, no announcement. They simply removed it, as if erasing it might erase what people felt. It didn't, because panic doesn't need a place to exist. It just needs belief.